If someone calls you bird-brained, they're probably trying to say that you're a little slow. But considering all we've learned about how smart some birds really are, this may not be the read your bully thinks it is. Let's dive bomb straight into the brains of crows. Are they as smart as they say? Or do people just think they're deep because they're goth? Hey, I'm Tasha, and this is Animalogic, the show that unpacks the nature of nature. Today we're asking the question, are crows smarter than a fifth grader? You could go pretty much anywhere on Earth and you'd find crows. Their sleek black feathers make them stand out whenever they land, and their dashing wings cut a majestic figure when they're airborne. These icons sometimes represent death, the story behind naming a flock of crows a murder. But they're also associated with power, evolution, and trickery. Almost every mythology and culture in the world has some unique tale or origin story about crows. But why is that? Why do they fascinate us so much? Their main thing is their famous advanced thinking powers, but even that is selling them short. Did you know that crows are also incredible mimics? They've been trained to count up to 7, with the most verbose among them being able to say over 100 words and 50 full sentences. Without having heard it, what do you think they'd sound like? I think they'd sound like this. 1, 2, 3. Some pet crows can even mimic their owners' voices to mock the family dog and torment the livestock. Their rap for being tricksters is definitely earned. On the flip side, crows are also known for their soft side, bringing gifts of shiny objects and stones to humans that feed them and treat them kindly. Crows and their corvid brethren are some of the smartest non-primate creatures on planet Earth, at least in the way the primates are smart. Depending on the study, their intelligence has been compared to that of a smart gorilla, a dumb Neanderthal, or an average 7-year-old kid. Crows have been the focus of studies on bird intelligence because of their remarkable natural abilities, like fashioning tools to get a tasty snack, leading us humans to personify them. That's because we humans love to use ourselves as the bar, leaving us to wonder, how smart are crows compared to us? But before we can truly determine what groups of creatures, or humans for that matter, are the best analog for crows, we need to talk about intelligence in general, at least as we classify it from our human perspective. We have to keep in mind that human intelligence evolved to help us with our own specific needs in our unique environments. Other species have their own challenges to overcome, so intelligence from species to species won't always mean the same thing. Flighted birds, for example, navigate life in the air, where every direction, up, down, side to side, has potential for movement. Without assistance, humans are bound to a single plane, moving back and forth, side to side. Imagine how that must impact a bird's spatial perception, and therefore, their brain development. Having said all of that, if we're going to figure out who's smarter, a 7-year-old human or a crow, we need to measure their smarts with our own yardsticks. But even the question of what it means to be smart is a huge mystery. There's a lot of debate, but no consensus. We, the very humans who are comparing ourselves to other animals, can't agree what intelligence actually is. What we can agree on pretty universally is that human intelligence is a psychological construct, a concept we've put together to explain something we can't observe. One generally accepted definition of intelligence is the ability to reason, plan, solve problems, think abstractly, comprehend complex ideas, learn quickly, and learn from experience. So let's see how the crows fit into that. Let's start at the beginning and ask the question, can crows reason? A 2012 study on New Caledonian crows set out to answer just that. Let me take a moment here to talk for a second about New Caledonian crows, since we'll be hearing a lot about them in this episode. They're considered among the most intelligent of all the crows, and are therefore studied more deeply than other species of corvids. They're the nerdiest member of the nerdiest bird family, and of course, they perform really well on standardized tests. In this study, the researchers wanted to know if crows can figure out cause and effect if the cause is hidden, which would show reasoning, an ability that was thought to be uniquely human. In other words, if they started watching a movie halfway through, could they figure out how it started? The study gives the example of seeing leaves moving erratically in a thick canopy. We can deduce that there must be something heavy moving around in the tree and shaking the branches. But this understanding of the hidden cause of an action isn't a given for other species. In the experiment, 8 crows watched 2 series of events. In the first, a human entered a hide next to a crow feeder. Then a remote-controlled stick was waved around the feeder, and finally, the human exited the hide. In the second, the stick was moved without the human entering or exiting. The stick was set up very close to the feeder, so the crows could see that they might be hit by the stick if they were to go for a snack. In the case when they saw the human enter and exit, they approached the box less cautiously. When it was unclear who or what moved the stick, and if it might move on its own again, the crows proceeded with caution. This shows some pretty advanced reasoning on the crow's part. Good work, guys. Next up on our checklist of human intelligence, we have plan, which requires a key mark of intelligence: imagination. Most animals are not able to map out their next few moves into the future. But studies have shown that crows are planners, just like us. One study published in 2019 by researchers at the University of Auckland in New Zealand showed that New Caledonian crows are able to plan several steps ahead to get what they want, a bit like a chess player thinking through future moves. In the experiment, the crows were given a multi-step puzzle that required them to use tools in a specific sequence to reach a food reward. Crucially, the different parts of the puzzle were hidden from each other, meaning the birds couldn't simply react to what they were seeing in the moment. Instead, they had to remember where different tools were and mentally plan how each step would help them solve the next one. The setup also included red herring tools that looked useful but wouldn't actually help solve the problem, to test if the crows could ignore bad options and stick to a plan. Many of the crows successfully solved the entire sequence on their first try, suggesting they weren't just learning through trial and error, but were actually mapping out the steps in advance. Yep, sometimes I walk into a room and I forget why I'm there. And while I'm doing that, the crow outside my window is already planning its next heist. But planning isn't everything. Sometimes you need to think on your feet. That's where the unique ability of New Caledonian crows and their ability to solve problems without a plan steps up. Another study set out to understand if crows solve problems with insight, visualizing different outcomes, or through a feedback loop of trying something and seeing if what they're doing is working. In this case, the crows were tasked with pulling a string horizontally to get a treat. Since the string had slack, pulling on it didn't immediately move the treat closer, so the birds didn't have that instant visual feedback with each pull. Almost none of the crows completed this task successfully, showing that they rely on visual confirmation to problem solve. To the credit of the crows, chimpanzees also didn't perform well with a similar experiment. Speaking of primates, we know through studies over the last 30 years that crows actually have cognitive abilities on par with our cousins. That's because their brains have similar characteristics to primates, despite having a completely different brain architecture. Bird brains lack a cortex, the outermost layer of the brain and the part that looks all lumpy and bumpy. In your brain, the cortex is responsible for a lot, including thinking, memory, language, consciousness, and integrating complex information from all across your brain. Primate neurons are arranged in layers, while crow brains are organized in nuclear clusters. Because of these clusters, crows actually have even more neurons than primates and show similar abilities. And that's all without having a cortex, which was long believed to be the pinnacle of cognition. Okay, let's go back to our list of qualities of human intelligence. We now need to find out if crows can think abstractly. If you had asked Descartes or John Locke, they would have said, "You're bonkers." According to them, abstract thinking is uniquely human. One study looked at whether crows can do something like analogical reasoning, which means understanding not just the thing they see, but also the relationships between them. In the experiment, 2 crows were first trained to match objects by simple features like color and shape. Then they were tested on relational matching, choosing pairs that had the same kind of relationship as a sample pair, even though none of the items looked exactly the same. The crows succeeded at this task, showing they could go beyond surface features and respond to abstract similarities in relationships, something researchers had mostly seen in primates before. Pretty smart. Okay, but what about comprehending complex ideas? Crows, for example, are masters of object permanence, which is the understanding that objects still exist even when they aren't visible. It takes human infants at least half a year to start developing this understanding. That's why peekaboo is so delightful for babies. When you put your hands in front of your face, they genuinely believe you've disappeared. What a surprise when you magically rematerialize in front of their very eyes. In other comprehension of complex ideas, one study set out to discover if crows could be trained to translate perceived numerosity into number of actions. As expected, the crows had absolutely no issue blasting through this task. Since we're already talking about crows outperforming human children, it's worth mentioning that crows are capable of recursion, the ability to identify one idea within another. Like, the man the lady talked to ran. The crows performed at the same level as 3 to 4-year-old kids. We actually got a chance to speak with one of the researchers who did this study to tell us about her work and her experience with some of the smartest animals on Earth.
My name is Diana Liao. I'm a postdoctoral researcher studying crow cognition and communication at the University of Tübingen.
Since we can't just ask crows to tell us how smart they are, one of the key things researchers have to do is design ways to test their abilities.
It's very difficult kind of in designing these studies, right? Because we can't ask them exactly what are you thinking or what can you do? And so we kind of think about, oh, what are the things we want to test potentially? And how do we design a project that gets at this? So one of my studies was teaching crows how to kind of count out loud, like could they control the number of vocalizations that they made? And initially, they just had to learn like how to associate like a cue with making that number of vocalizations. And it's not like I could tell them, oh, I want you to do this. They had to figure it out themselves. And one of the mistakes I made early on was the fact that, oh, they were really good at this task because they just saw a cue, made the number of vocalizations. And then I realized they were actually kind of cheating a little bit. They were just vocalizing until they got a reward. And so then we had to redesign the experiment so that they had to peck at the screen to report that they were done vocalizing. And this allowed us to be like, oh yeah, they can control the number of vocalizations and then report, this is what I've done before. So really kind of careful experimental design is what I would say is really helpful.
Yep, the crows were outsmarting literal scientists by finding ways of getting treats as easily as possible. They are smart. We'll get back to Dr. Liao in a bit. Okay, moving on to our last test for human intelligence. Can crows learn from experience? If you've ever pissed off a crow, you'll know this to be true. Crows will hold decades-long grudges if you mess with them. American crows are known to recognize human faces, especially those faces that have crossed them in the past. If that wasn't bad enough, in the same way that crow parents pass down skills like tool use to their fledglings, they'll also pass down their beefs. Take off a crow and they'll tell all their family and friends, who will join in the scolding of the perp if they dare show their face again. So they're smart, petty, and gossipy. That's a dangerous combination. But it's not all eternal grudges for crows. We know from observing them that making and using tools actually puts them in a good mood. One study showed that crows are actually intrinsically motivated to use tools. This means doing something just because it's enjoyable or satisfying. So using tools might not just be about food they get, they might actually be having a really good time.
And the New Caledonian crows, we think that they're special because they live on an isolated island with no woodpeckers, which is why they might have developed this tool use for foraging. Exactly, so there would be competition for that food source. Yeah, so as far as I know, this is not my area of research, but I think it's really interesting. It would be the New Caledonian crow and also the alala, which would be the Hawaiian crow that seem to be using tools. And those are all islands with no woodpeckers.
If you've ever seen a woodpecker fighting a crow, now you know why. So what's next in crow intelligence research?
So this is one of the things I'm interested in is like how good are they at learning? And I think one of the reasons we see corvids like all around the world, I think they're not on like every continent except for Antarctica, is that they're like ridiculously adaptable and good at learning these things. So I think this is partially where like in the lab, we train them to do different tasks to kind of expose like what cognitive abilities they have.
Thank you, Dr. Liao. If you want to keep up with her work, click on the link in the description. Reasoning, planning, problem solving, abstract thinking, comprehending complex ideas, learning quickly and from experience. It seems that by every metric, crows fit the bill for human levels of intelligence. Now, who do we call to have the term bird brain stricken from our vocabulary? So what should we talk about next? Let me know in the comments below and be sure to tune in every week for new episodes. Thanks for watching. See ya.